Hello. Today we have a third line, and we also have two sun transits. The sun at the moment is going into line 3. Oh, it's in line 3. Sorry, went into line 3 at 1:19 this morning, GMT, and then it goes into line 4 later on today. So there will be two postings today. The second one will be at around either 8 p.m. I think around 8 p.m. tonight. I'll put it out. So look out for that one. But currently we are in the third line of the first gate. And it has got the headline, the energy to sustain creative work. The energy is a potential because this is the G center. It's not a motor. And the throat center at the other end of the channel, that's not a motor either. This tells us that the ability to sustain creative work is going to be dependent on its connection with others. And we're in the third line, so we're still lower trigram. There is going to be some difficulty meeting the right forces on the other end. And there will be some banging into the wrong forces, going through the trial and error process of discovery. If you were a bookmaker and you were going to do some gambling on who was going to be the mutative success in gate 1, and you had all the examples of the first gate and all the various lines, you might be tempted to put it all on the second or the fifth lines. The second and the fifth lines, they would normally be the lines we would consider to be the most successful. The second, because of its quality of being seen by others and therefore being recognized. And the fifth, because others will always project the best qualities onto them, the best possibilities, at least in the beginning. Under normal circumstances, then you would think it would be either the second or the fifth line of the first hexagram that would be the ones who are most mutative. But this is not the case. They are deeply handicapped, both of them, because they, more than any of the other lines, they bring interference into their lives. If you're going to make a bet, then you can bet on the first, third, and fourth lines. The sixth lines, well, we never really know what's going to happen with the sixth line, but the first, third, and fourth lines, there's always the possibility for mutation because they're much better equipped to keep the outside from interfering. So the third line is called the energy to sustain creative work. In the exaltation, Mars exalted as a symbol of the profound need for self-expression, the deep need for self-expression. So there's a deep need here in the third line. You might have gathered that. They have to keep on going out there. They have to keep on banging in, trying, and just confronting these other things. The possibility of resistance is always going to be there for them. And remember, this is individual. So there is also the quality of melancholy. There can be a deep sadness here. And also there can be the same balance of happiness. Melancholy is a chemistry. We know this now. It requires no reason. It's not about being sad because, or even being happy because. And it's quite interesting. Very often, and I know this as an emotional being, that if I'm a bit down, I'm low on my wave, then people will say, "Oh, what's the matter? Why are you so low? What's going on?" But if I'm happy and up, they very rarely will say, "Oh, what's going on? Why are you so happy?" It's an interesting thing. So we don't question that high end there. It's like nobody really questions when, if they ask you a question and you say no, do you want to come out? And you say no, and they may very often follow that up with, "Oh, why not?" But if they ask you out and you say yes, they never say, "Oh, why?" Which is, maybe they don't. I mean, I'm not sure that I ever follow that up. But it's an interesting thing, the things that we question and the things that we feel comfortable about. And I have no idea why I'm talking about this. Anyway, melancholy is what I was saying, because we don't need a reason for it. This is why. We don't need a reason for anything. And if we get caught in an identification where we have to give a reason, then, it's not good. It's not healthy for us to do that. Melancholia, it's a chemistry. And all individuality, wherever it is is a byproduct of mutative potential, and we call that mutative potential melancholy. The very mutative chemistry that exists in these codons results in chemical shifts that we call happiness and sadness. This is really important to know because it's not arbitrary. It's a chemical reaction within our body. Sadness can be a very creative environment. It's a mutative environment. And the moment that you turn sadness into depression, then you strip yourself of its creative potential. When you are down in the melancholic process, when you're sad, that's the moment when you're open to the forces, when you're open to the muse. And the moment that you occupy yourself in that sadness with reasons, with justifications, the muse can't get in. Melancholy can be a beautiful thing. Sadness can be a very rich environment out of which all kinds of creative beauty is born. And in the moment that the chemistry changes to happiness, that's about being productive. The first hexagram, this creative, has to recognize that it has a melancholic process, that it is going to be sad. It's going to be sad that nobody sees it or recognizes it or understands it or appreciates whatever its creative expression happens to be. And in that sadness, it goes into stories and it does its thing and it feels sorry for itself and it blames everyone. Instead of seeing that that space is so rich. It's a place where they can be open to creation. And the moment that they go to the other side, the other side of their chemistry, that's the moment that the possibility opens up for them to be able to empower others with that creativity. This is the energy for creative work. The detriment says, material forces can disrupt creativity and lead to over-ambition. Materialism disrupts creativity. These are the people who are actually very talented and who never get to fulfill the potential of their real talent because they get pulled into commercial possibilities. Someone who is struggling to be a legitimate painter, but who needs money. So they get a job as a graphic artist and they get caught up in the world of buying and selling televisions or cars or mortgages or vacations and so on. And then they sell out their uniqueness to the mundane plane. The moment you say, if I can paint that, I will get this, then what you paint is going to be inferior in its quality, and it's going to be inferior in its spirit too. It can only come out when it comes out, and it's not about being conditioned by whether or not it's going to benefit you, because this is not tribal circuitry. This is individuality, and the individual is going to operate very differently. The value of materialism to the individual is that they can spend money to make sure that more people notice them, and that's what they do. It isn't for the things that materialism brings, not tribal. The fact that you can be a terrible painter and you can buy good ads in the London Times, it doesn't mean you're necessarily going to sell your paintings. So it goes back to two things, really. Firstly, being clear about how you enter into any experience. And secondly, the recognition that creativity is not something that you can control. Creation is independent of will. Remember that back in the first line? The ego, the will, needs an equation of work and rest to operate correctly. This creation being independent of will means there's no proper equation for rest and work. So you may end up like Picasso, who painted prolifically, but with huge dissatisfaction until his dying moment. Or you could paint 20 or 30 pictures in your lifetime and not be concerned about it at all. In this third line, the exalted side can get past the interference, even though it meets it, And in meeting it, it learns a lot because it learns to recognize what happens to its creative process when it is interfered with. But it can keep on moving through. On the other side, materialism disrupts creativity. The moment that you give a young painter 100 quid for a canvas, you instantaneously change the way they produce their art. Because the materialism, if they have the detriment, is just going to pull them away from continuing their unique mutative process. One of the most common scenarios in our Western world is to have so many young, hugely creative people who've been totally screwed up by money. It's amazing how many careers have been destroyed by easy money, whether we're talking about artists or actors or rock and roll stars. This is part of the theme of direction. We have to wait for the right timing. The second and the third lines, they have similar problems in dealing with the outside, but the third is better equipped because it can adapt. The lower trigram in and of itself has a great deal of difficulty with trying to keep interference away. And there's also a thing I would like to mention that is positive interference. And it's not the fact that all interference is negative. And this is something that the third line learns from being interfered with in its creative process. There is a Chinese saying, good news, bad news, who knows? The person that interferes with your creative process may turn you onto a different track where mutation can take place. We have strange allies in life. But the thing that is crucial here really is that interference is something to be watched for when you have the first gate. The grounding is in the second gate called the third line is called patience. This is the most exalted of all the third lines in all of the gates. This is the teacher who never stops being a student. Patience is so important for individuality. And when you're waiting for the muse and you're sitting with your melancholy, or you're waiting for that pulse of energy to hit and bring inspiration, whatever it is, patience is a great grounding keynote for pretty much all the gates in this circuit. So Mercury went into gate 9 at 0046 this morning. This is the sacral gate of focus. It's a format gate in the channel of concentration, bringing all of us some influence of this gate. The ability to focus on the finer details, that logical focus, because this is the logical collective circuit. The moon is still in gate 61. It's been there since 6:03 this morning. The head center gate of mystery and inner truth with the pressure to know the unknown. And also the potential awareness to know there are some things that will never be known and to find some acceptance there for that. It moves to gate 60 at 1621. This is the root center again, the gate of limitation and acceptance. It's another format gate. This time it's individual, so it's one half of the channel of mutation. It's the energy for mutation that comes in a pulse. Remember, we talk about this pulse energy all through anything to do with individuality. And Pluto is sitting in gate 60. He's been there for quite a while now. And we still have gate 41 as part of this sort of 24-hour cycle, but as we have 2 sun transits today, I will include 41 when I do the line 4 a little bit later on. So as I said, I'll post that around 8 p.m. GMT. But for now, that is our third line. Thank you very much for joining me. And until a little bit later on, boys, love yourself and go gently.